We're going to be looking at a power winger today. The prospect spotlight is on Liam Greentree for this episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hattie Kalakash, joined by Sebastian High, and on today's show, we'll be breaking down Liam Greentree's game in detail. We'll give you a scouting report describing his type of play, what his tools are. We'll start off with the puck skills, the stick handling, shooting, and playmaking trifecta. In our second segment, we'll look more at the toolkit and the habits in Liam Greentree's game. And then finally, we'll look at the NHL projection and team fit for Liam Greentree in our final segment. Right now, he's predicted to be ranked to be picked anywhere between 10 and 20, really, across the board. 6'2", 200 pounds. He plays right wing, but he's a left shot winger. So yeah, talk me through the type of game that Liam Greentree plays for the Windsor Spitfires in the OHL.
For sure. So Liam Greentree is one of only two CHL draft eligibles this season who was captaining his team. He was named captain just about 2 months ago for Windsor, and he is a 6'2", 198-pound winger who plays a real power style game with a high level of intelligence. He's a really, really good puck supporter. The way that he supports play off puck and on puck, the way he's able to connect play with his line mates. He's a really, really deft play connector at the OHL level. And that has translated to some pretty awesome production so far this season. He's absolutely dominating the production for Windsor compared to his teammates, having logged 30 goals and 80 points in 54 games. And I believe that's 26 points ahead of second place in production on his team, which is a massive gap. And
Yeah.
what makes Greentree tick is the way that he thinks the game. And he has some excellent tools on top of that, while the skating ability is a clear drawback, which we are going to delve into in this episode. The goal scoring and the playmaking are both well above average tools, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I can start with the goal scoring because I think that's been present since the start of the year. For me, from the start, I saw Greentree as a really good kind of small area shooter. He's able to lift pucks in tight really well, but he's also able to shoot from distance. He's got a really powerful and accurate release. And at the start of the year, I really thought that's where his game was kind of limited. I saw him as a meat and potatoes kind of power forward who drives the net, lifts pucks in tight, and shoots from distance. But the more I've seen him this year, I mean, we'll get into the playmaking. Let's start with the shooting. Really, for me, the grade is about a 6.5, 7. It's a really good shot. It's heavy. It's accurate. Um, it gives goaltenders some trouble at the OHL level. They have trouble handling rebounds when Liam Greentree's shooting. But the playmaking for me has been the biggest progress in this game. I mean, at the start of the year, like I said, seemed more like a meat and potatoes kind of power forward sniper type of player. But as the years gone on, the playmaking just unfurled, and we'll get into that, into why that is a bit more when we talk about the toolkit and the habits, because that's really where the progress has been the most in Greentree's game. But the playmaking in isolation is really good, especially in recent games. It's been really obvious how good he is at connecting plays in transition, at playing these small area give and goes that put him in better positions to shoot. But he's also able to play that long range playmaking games. He can bomb the puck up the ice. Most of the time, it's by necessity because the skating is an issue. But he's still able to hit those lanes accurately and make some really, really good passes. So for me, the passing has gone from maybe a 4.5, 5 at the start of the year to a bona fide strength, maybe a 7, 7.5 in this game. I think I even prefer it to his shooting now.
Wow, I'm not quite sure I'm quite there just yet. I still like the shooting a lot. That said, the progression with the playmaking has been massive, especially in terms of being able to elevate some players that aren't quite on his level on his team. He's
Yeah.
been redirecting his focus to try to elevate his line mates rather than to do everything on his own, which there were some flashes of earlier on in the season. But I think like describing the shot as heavy is exactly how I how I describe it as well. Like there is real power behind it, but the shot selection is also really calculated and really intelligent. He is able to delay when he has space. He's constantly trying to get to a higher danger area before he's using his release. And when he's shooting from lower danger areas, he's shooting for tips and for rebounds. He's not trying to go top shelf from the blue line. He's really quite calculated in what he's trying to do, and he's quite realistic in what the chances are for him to create from his current position on the ice. And that also kind of goes hand in hand with his playmaking. He will not shoot the puck when he has better passing options that will get the puck to higher danger areas, and that despite playing on a weaker team this season, which is something that I think will translate very nicely. And there's been a lot of professional habits in his game, which we'll delve into a bit more in the next segment, but the tools on their own are also quite strong.
Yeah, absolutely. And the selection of plays that you mentioned is exactly why I prefer him to Cole Eiserman right now. I think that Greentree thinks the game like an NHLer, but he's also got this really solid defense, this really solid decision making that works so well with his playmaking and shooting tendencies. Whereas Eichmann is really your shoot at all costs, rifle the puck. He's got an amazing shot, but he's looking for corners from the blue line. Whereas with Greentree, it's more that I'm at the blue line. I've got a teammate open in the high slot. I'm gonna play give and go, drive down the wing, get the puck back, fake a pass, kind of roll my wrists into a shot type of thing. He's a lot more calculated and multi-layered in his ability to create offense in the offensive zone. I think that's really what's the standout for me with Greentree. And the stick handling is also really good. He doesn't have the foot speed or the mindset really to try to dangle through everyone like a Berkeley Catton or a Trevor Conley, but what I really like about his stick handling ability is the way he's able to set up his next puck touch. He catches pucks in his hip pocket, ready to rifle if he needs to, but also in a position to be able to make a pass off reception if he needs to. I also like the way that sometimes, let's say he receives a pass on the backhand, it doesn't take him 8 touches to get it in his hip pocket for a shot. He's able to take one quick touch and the puck is ready to release. I think that's a big area of strength in this game. So his stick handling, I give it probably a 5.5, 6, mainly because of that ability to set up his next play really quickly. But he doesn't have the hands of a dynamic player. He doesn't, he's not going to Patrick Kane his way through offenses. That's not his game. But I like the fundamentals in his play in his stick handling game. Do you see kind of the same with Greentree?
Yeah, I do. Like he uses the handling skill that he has to just make his game tick a little bit more smoothly. And as you
Yeah.
mentioned, he's really good on his first touch. Like as soon as he gets the puck, whether it's a retrieval or a reception, he takes one quick touch to get it into a place where he's comfortable operating, and is then immediately thinking about the next play. And he's not overly flashy with how he leverages his handling ability. And as you mentioned, it's not an overly dynamic tool. He's not going to dangle through your defenses. That said, he uses his handling in a very, very NHL-esque way already, which
Yeah.
just continues to work with that projectability element, which is probably one of the most valuable things with Greentree, is the way that he already approaches the game as you want NHL players to approach the game of hockey.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a projectability. It's all about projectability, really, with Greentree. We'll get into that even more when we talk about the toolkit and the habits in William Greentree's game in the second segment, right after these messages from our sponsors over at Sleeper.
It's past the halfway point of the NHL season, but you can still get in on the action with Sleeper. Sleeper is our number one choice here at the Locked On NHL podcast network for all of your daily fantasy hockey needs. That's because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. And all you need to do so is to correctly predict the outcome of 8 specific player stats. And you can get really creative with that, whether you want to bet on some of the easy players in the league, like the really good ones, like the Sidney Crosbys or the Nikita Kucherovs, to put up a couple points in the next game. Or if you want to make it a bit more interesting and maybe stay in line with the theme of this specific podcast, and bet on the young guns in the league, whether it be Connor McDavid or Brock Faber, the choice is yours. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability.
Did you know that even if you have a 401k retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar that you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. So Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. So get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees applies. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024 validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. You must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 30% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRAs available to U.S. customers in good standing, and Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. Alrighty, so moving on to our second segment, we're talking a bit more about the toolkit and habits in Liam Greentree's game, and that's where he shines a lot more for me. The puck skills are great, and we got into the conversation about the toolkit when we talked about the way his stick handling helps and uplifts his goal scoring and passing ability. I think that's really a great element of his game. That's really where the toolkit starts to match because with Greentree, it's all about how his tools interact. It's all about how his tools uplift each other and combine to make him a good player. But despite that, I'd say the skating is still a part of his toolkit that kind of limits the rest of his game, right?
For sure. I think like the skating is the one tool that is a pretty comfortable below average rating for us personally. Like, I think if we're going with our rating scale, he'd be a 4 grade skater, perhaps. Like he's quite choppy in his strides. There's a lack of stride depth. The input mechanics are not the greatest. The output isn't awful because he is quite intelligent. He knows how to make his tool as efficient as it possibly can be, and he gets around the ice relatively okay at the OHL level as a result. But if we're talking about NHL projection, the skating is one thing that will need to take a couple strides, no pun intended, in order for him to really open up his game in a really comfortable fashion in the NHL. But it's not like awful. It's not a massive red flag, but it's a clear weakness in my eyes.
Yeah, for sure. I think that the issue really with Greentree's skating stride, it's more about kind of weight distribution. I feel like a lot of his weight goes forward when he's skating. He's often on his toes rather than on the middle of his blade. So that gives him a bit less balance, and I think that you can fix. I don't think you'll get him to a point where he's flying around the ice, but if you can just make him more stable on his feet, that's a great start, right? Like that's really a great starting point for his skating ability, and that can turn him into at least a very effective transition player. Because right now he'll mainly delegate in transition. He'll pass the puck off and then move and find these pockets of space from which to work. But if you can get him to a level where you know he's able to man those transitions himself, carry the puck up, at least from blue line to blue line, and then kind of figure things out from there. That's a basis for his game that you can work with. But it's just for me the way that he thinks the game. It's so clearly a result of being a poor skater for so long. Because when you're a poor skater, you need to work off the puck. You need to figure out the positioning game extremely well so that you're not hitting pockets late, so that you're getting to the net front in advance. You're able to drive around opponents, find those pockets of space and work with them. And I think the game that he plays and the way that he approaches the game mentally and the decisions that he makes are so clearly a product of his poor skating. And I feel like once you improve his skating, get it to at least an average element of his game, that's only going to uplift the rest of his game because his positioning is so solid already, right?
For sure. Like it's not something I'm overly concerned about for those specific reasons. Even if he's not able to elevate his skating too much, the way that he thinks the game is already going to make the transition to the NHL a lot more simple. He approaches the game off puck a little bit like a player like Tyler Toffoli does, for instance, who has never really gotten past a 3 or 3.5 grade in terms of skating and is a
Yeah.
really damn good NHL player nonetheless. He's already scored 25 goals this season with New Jersey, and that's been a struggling team too. But I think that Greentree is certainly the style of player who has enough of an identity in terms of how he approaches the game, how he's able to move off puck and use grit, use physicality to access the inside, use off puck movement and cyclical motion in his routes to get to soft pockets of ice. That I'm not too concerned of him being able to become a really solid middle six player at the NHL level. In terms of accessing that like super impressive top six upside, elevating the skating a little bit will make that job easier, but I don't necessarily think it is something that he needs to address at 100% in order to project into that top end type of upside.
Yeah, for sure. I see it as a part of his game that, can certainly kind of improve, but it's not an element that's necessarily going to hinder him because, like you said, there are players in the NHL that have poor skating and have still made fantastic careers. I don't think that's going to hinder him, and I feel like the Toffoli comparison is actually pretty adept because Toffoli's a player who's also really capable defensively. He was able to get involved in defensive situations, and his skating doesn't hold him back from being able to back check, being able to hit the right pockets, put his stick in the right lanes. And I feel like that matches Greentree to a T. There's a reason why he's a captain. It's not just because of his off ice leadership. It's also because he leads by example on the ice. He does the right things. He uplifts his team. He brings energy and it injects so much motor into the game that it you watch him. If you're playing on this line, you feel bad not doing the things that he's doing, not putting in the effort that he's putting in. So he's a player that's really overall a great prospect in terms of not just being a great individual player, but also being able to uplift his team consistently when he's on the ice through leading by example. Um, but yeah, in terms of habits, for me, it really revolves around his middle drives and his ability to consistently hit those middle lanes and his desire to hit them. So it's not just the motor, it's not just the positioning, it's also the mentality of, I'm going to drag this puck to the middle and I'm taking a defenseman with me and, we'll figure it out from there. I think that's a great mindset for a player with this kind of frame. He's already
For
6'2",
sure.
200 pounds at 18. Like it's a great part of his game, right?
It is, certainly, and I'll also add to that his playmaking goes along the same lines. He's constantly shoveling pucks towards the middle of the ice, towards high danger areas. He's extraordinarily middle driven, both in his on puck and off puck game as well. So everything he does in the offensive zone is
Yeah.
really focused on the slot, on getting to the high danger areas, on creating confusion in those areas, and using all of the tools he has, whether it be his intelligence, his shot, his playmaking, his grit, his physicality, to just get something done and to create something. And I think
Yeah.
that as we mentioned to start this segment, the way that all those tools kind of interlink and work together to elevate one another is key to his NHL projection here.
Yeah, absolutely. There are things up for a second segment. We talked about the toolkit and habits. Coming up, we'll be talking about the NHL projection for Liam Greentree, what we expect in terms of points, what style of player he's likely to be in the NHL, and also which team would be the best fit for him. We'll get into that right after these messages from our sponsors at Indeed. No matter how the last game went, anytime you take the field, you've got a shot at greatness. So give your team the best shot at winning by recruiting more MVPs with Indeed. If you're hiring, Indeed is the best place to get that done because Indeed is the hiring partner where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. And it's the only job site where you're guaranteed to find quality applications to meet the must have requirements or else you don't pay. Overall, one of the things I like the most about Indeed when I was looking for a job is that it makes finding jobs really easy because it matches you with the types of jobs that would fit really well with your specific skill sets. I'm someone who works really well in customer service, who's really good on the phone. So being able to find a job that matches that was great. And there's also no surprises. You know exactly what the salary is heading into the job application, so you're not shocked once you get the offer. So start hiring right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at indeed.com/locked on. This offer is valid through March 31st. So go to indeed.com/locked on to claim your $75 credit before March 31st. Terms and conditions apply, but if you need to hire, you need Indeed. Alrighty, so moving on to our next segment, we'll be talking about the NHL projection with Liam Greentree and also the team fit, in terms of which teams would be the best kind of fit for what Greentree brings to the game and what they're looking for. But to start with the NHL projection, I feel like Tyler Toffoli is a great kind of middle ground for Greentree in terms of what his ceiling could be. I could see him become a really good complementary piece on a top line, especially if you can get that play that skating speed and overall agility and balance up a couple notches. And I think it's realistic given how many strides have been taken recently with the ability to develop skating. Right, like a lot of teams are investing in that, and they're seeing a lot of dividends. Whereas previously, people would kind of just put that on the back burner. So I think if he can improve his skating, I could see him become kind of a complimentary first liner with about 75 to 80 point upside with the right line mates. But I feel like Tyler Toffoli is the realistic and most likely projection with him. Do you agree?
Fully. I mean, I think that the Toffoli comp makes a lot of sense, both in terms of the skating deficiencies, the off puck strength, the high end intelligence, the goal scoring upside, and like the subtle playmaking ability. That said, I do think that Green Tree's high end ceiling is higher than Tyler Toffoli has kind of plateaued at, which is a very, very good player. I'm a massive fan of Toffoli, but with Green Tree, you have this high end upside in all three zones. I think that there's a decent amount of defensive upside in this player as well. I think that a future as a penalty killer is certainly a possibility, as well as being on top power play. He's so versatile and at such a young age already has a really thorough understanding of how to leverage his tools in every single situation that he finds himself in to tilt the ice in his team's favor. And he uses his intelligence so well in that front. But I think that anywhere the floor with Greentree is probably around a third liner in my eyes. I think that you're getting a guaranteed pretty solid NHLer with him, because the trajectory of his development right now is already so promising with how far he's come in the last 6 months, on top of just the way that he approaches the game being really, really, really attuned to what coaches value at the NHL level, and he's going to get game time. I'm not particularly concerned about that.
Mhm.
But the upside is quite intriguing. It's not that of a line driver. I think that anything apart from being a first line driver is within the scope with Greentree, and it likely happens on the wing. But the way that he thinks the game isn't too dissimilar to how you want centers to think the game, is it? Even though he's been playing exclusively on the
Yeah.
wing so far this season.
Yeah, absolutely. I see a lot of similarities in the way that he approaches the game mentally to Zach Benson. That's another player who's played the wing his entire kind of
Yeah.
junior career, but also played some games at center. But in the NHL, Zach Benson, we're seeing it now with Buffalo. I don't think he's played a single game at center. I don't think he's taken a single face-off, and I don't think that's changing. Teams really like their centers to have experience at center. So far, Greentree, I think he's played maybe a game or two at center, but not enough for him to kind of project as one long term in the NHL, especially given how teams tend to develop their forwards, especially the ones that are closer to the NHL than the rest in terms of their processing of the game. Um, for me with Greentree, I mean it's really a matter of next year as the bona fide captain for the whole year with his team. Does he end up playing half the year at center? Does he end up playing 75% of the year at center? Maybe. And if that's the case, then maybe his team will be, kind of at least tempted to try him at center. Because the skill set's definitely there. The way he thinks the game, the way he approaches the game, the way he supports play off puck, the defensive ability, like all that projects so well to the center position. But I think teams overall will, shy away from putting a player at center at the pro level who hasn't played center at the junior level. So it really depends on what happens with him next year with Windsor. And also, if he gets a trade to a better team and ends up playing at center there too, that's an even more enticing element of his game. But I also want to talk about the floor because it's really high with Greentree. I don't see a scenario in which Greentree doesn't become, at the very least, an extremely good third line defensive player, right?
I fully agree. Like the way he approaches the game, the way he thinks it is already quite similar to how coaches want their third liners to play, in terms of being responsible defensively, but also really gritty and high energy in the offensive zone. And when you layer in the high end tools that he does have, like the playmaking, the goal scoring, as well as the intelligence, it all just kind of falls into line. Like, of course, injuries are always a wild card, right? Like you never have a full guarantee when it comes to projections like this. But as far as the type of player that you can expect to have available to you at like 12th overall, you don't have much more of a guaranteed third liner than Liam Greentree. Like the other option along those lines in this draft class would probably be Michael Brandstad-Nygaard, in terms of being that high floor, but Greentree is certainly among the highest floor players in this draft class.
For sure. I think the Michael Brunswick-Newgard allegory is pretty good because, I mean, they're players in similar molds. I see Brunswick-Newgard's a better skater, but less offensively well-rounded and gifted.
Yeah.
But overall, the kind of projectability in their game, the way they think the game, the way they approach the game is, in both cases, really, really high end. And I think that's going to be a differentiating factor in both of their kind of NHL trajectories. But moving on to the NHL team fits, there's a lot of them. We're looking at the 10 to 20 range, and there's a lot of teams that could use a player like this, and teams that historically like to pick players like these. I want to start off with the New Jersey Devils, who currently are at 10th in the tank rankings. So if everything goes as planned, lottery wise, then they end up picking 10th overall. I think they could very much use a player like Greentree, and seeing him long term playing more of a defensive role with a pure play driver like a Jack Hughes or another great defensive player like Nico Hischier, long term I think is a great spot for him. And they could use some wingers to surround these guys. And Greentree is about as sure a bet as you can get to play in at least a third line, more likely second line role, and possibly even a top line role. So I think playing a player like this who's so good at complementing these skilled play drivers, playing him with a guy like Hughes or Hischier at center, amazing for his game. But yeah, what other teams do you see as a kind of good fit for Liam Greencher here?
Yeah, like I think three other teams come to mind. First, I'll start with San Jose. The Sharks lack a little bit of that grit and that versatility element in their offensive core, especially among the prospects. Like, they have a lot of like super high skill players, but fewer guys to insulate them that are also high end and think the game at a
Yeah,
high level. So I think that Green Shoe would really add an element that the Sharks are missing in their prospect pool, and that would be with the Pittsburgh draft pick, of course, not with their own one that's at like first or second overall. But the two other teams that have historically drafted a lot of players in this mold that I don't think Greentree is necessarily going to fall past would be the St. Louis Blues and the New York Islanders. These are two teams that really appreciate like high end grit and intelligence and reliability more than anything from their forwards as well. And we saw that
yeah.
with St. Louis last season with drafting Dalibor Dvorsky, who stylistically is quite different to Greentree, but brings that a similar element of safety in terms of a draft selection as being a high end two-way forward with versatility throughout the forward positions and with upside and also both special teams units. And Greentree falls into that philosophy quite easily.
Yeah, for sure. Those two teams are great fits as well. Um, if he slips to 16 and the Caps stay there, the Washington Capitals, I think that would be also a great fit. He works really well with their kind of skilled guys. They've got Hendrix Lapierre right now, who's kind of working his way up, and other prospects in that mold. So I think that would be a great fit as well. But yeah, there's a lot of options, and teams in the 10 to 20 range are going to love this type of player. This is a type of player who just attracts a lot of attention. And again, if you look at his production, he's 26 points ahead of everyone on his team. It's absurd what he's doing right now with Windsor. But that wraps things up for today's show. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. Again, we're so close to 1,000 subscribers, so hit that subscribe button. It takes a second of your time and helps the channel out a lot. If you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports. Make sure to tune in for our next shows as we continue our prospect spotlights for the month of March. This has been Haddock Kalikesh with Sebastian High, and we hope you tune in next time.